My name is Husseini Abdu. I'm a Nigerian. I work for Action Aid as the African Regional Governance Coordinator, meaning that I coordinate Action Aid governance work in Africa. And I have actually been involved with the EU African strategy process. I was one of the few Africans that were actually involved with the original EU strategy for Africa. And I have from inception been involved with the processes around the EU-Africa joint strategy since January this year in both Europe and in Africa. My organization has organized a series of consultations across Africa on civil society input into the EU-African strategy process. I think that the strategy ordinarily to define a good strategic relationship between EU and Africa is good. It's good because Africa and EU had a long historical relationship. But I actually think that also the process and the content and the issues we have that are being presented today as EU-African strategy is not deep enough to reflect the reality of African relationship with Europe. One is that the two documents, the first one, the EU strategy for Africa, and now the joint strategy, had failed to accept the reality of African relationship with Europe. And what are those realities? The role that Europe has played in defining contemporary Africa, from the period of slave trade all through the period of colonialism and our post-colonial political system, the role EU or Europe generally and its countries have played in the spate of conflict, the extractive industries, the crisis of democratic governance, we believe that we must first take that responsibility. Then on the African side, the African leaders also take the responsibility of mismanaging Africa in the last 50 years in collaboration with their European partners, and therefore keeping Africa in its contemporary state. And then secondly, my concern with the strategy is that it is still coined in a manner that presents Africa as a continent in perpetual crisis and conflict and lack of good governance, and therefore Europe, a wonderful country that is doing so well and doing so much in good governance and has no conflict, going back to Africa to help Africa. And I think that that does not give room for better partnership that we are actually talking about. What we expect is to accept this as a partnership process where Europe and Africa operate on the same level and agree to engage each other on the same level. But I have seen what I have been seeing, what I saw actually in the document is that Europe is the one assisting or going to help Africa, and therefore there is no partnership in it. So my advice is this. I want to see this as the beginning of the process. I don't want to see it as the end of the process. I want to see continual dialogue. I want to see continual processes of engaging African people and African civil society organizations to ensure that we deepen the strategy document and the plan of action, where we give legitimacy to the document, where both Africa and Europe and its people, we own the document. It is the ownership of the strategy that matters a lot. If we don't own it, we don't put commitment on it. But when we collectively own it, you find collective commitment. And if we find collective commitment, you'll find effective implementation. And the effective implementation of the strategy document will be in the interest of both Europe and Africa.